Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to more Conversations in the Digital Age. Having seen a presidential campaign riddled with videotaped evidence of possible sexual misconduct, search warrants covering unread emails on a laptop computer, classified information on personal servers, and Russian cyber hacks seeking to manipulate the electorate, we ask ourselves, what are the costs and benefits of a world connected, for better or for worse, through cyberspace? Here to help us ponder this question is an expert on the subject of cybersecurity. He is Adam Siegel, Director of the Digital and Cyberspace Policy Program at the Council on Foreign Relations. Adam Siegel is the author of the red-hot book with a long title, The Hacked World Order: How Nations Fight, Trade, Maneuver, and Manipulate in the Digital Age. Adam, we're delighted to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what's going on with all these emails? The election campaign has seemed to take a cyber dimension.
It has. We have what looks to be the hacking by Russian intelligence and military intelligence of the emails and servers of the Democratic National Committee, John Podesta, an advisor to Hillary Clinton, and some other Democratic organizations, and then the release of those emails in an attempt to either influence the election or just create confusion and chaos.
The intelligence community, the U.S. intelligence community, has said the Russians were responsible. Does that mean the Russian government, or does it mean individual Russians somewhere in Siberia?
Yeah, we don't know. When the initial reports came out, CrowdStrike, which was the cybersecurity firm that first reported the attacks, said that the hackers were probably from the GRU, which is military intelligence, and the FSB, the follow-up to the KGB, given the techniques and methods that they were using. When the Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence came out and attributed the attack to Russia, they say, given the types of attacks, we think they have to have permission from the highest level of Russian governments, but they didn't attribute it to the Russian government itself. So it could be criminal hackers who are being paid by the Russian government or others freelancing.
Now, why would Russians or the Russian government want to hack the emails of Debbie Wasserman Schultz or of the Democratic National Committee or of John Podesta?
It's an interesting question, because one of the characteristics of cyberspace is we don't often know what the intent of the hacker is. And we know that in the past the Russians have used cyber tools, cyber attacks to try to influence the elections in countries around them. So in the Ukrainian election in 2015, they sent texts and emails to knock some websites offline. They stole intelligence from Ukrainian parliament members. In this case, it's not clear if they were committing espionage and they were just spying on the Democratic campaign and they got caught and they decided to dump the material, or they always intended to try to influence the election.
Is it possible they were retaliating against Hillary Clinton because she had accused them of trying to rig the Ukrainian election?
It's possible. We know the Russians have a very broad conception of what they call information war, and the sense that trying to influence domestic politics through the internet is part of that. Certainly in 2011, during the Russian elections, they thought that when Secretary Clinton was talking about free and open elections, that she was trying to intervene and sway the elections against Putin. So it could be a response to that. It also could be a response to the sanctions that the U.S. and the EU are putting on Russia because of Crimea and Ukraine.
Now, as a technical matter, I mean, if I wanted to hack into the email servers of the Democratic National Committee, I wouldn't know where to begin. I wouldn't even know where they're located. How do I go about that? How did they go about it?
Well, what we think they did was what's called a spear phishing campaign. So a spear phish email is an email that's made to look like it comes from somebody that you know. and will have a link or something to download on it that has malicious software, malware on it. So it's sent to you. It says, hi Jim, this is Adam. Here's an article I thought you'd be interested in. You don't notice that the email address has been spoofed, has been made to look like it comes from me, and you click on that attachment.
But how do they know I know you? I mean, if it came from a stranger, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. If it comes from you, of course I open it.
They might know that they go on your LinkedIn account and they see that we're connected on LinkedIn. They look on your Twitter page and see that I'm a follower. They go to the council's public list and see members. So there's lots of ways that they could do intelligence to gather that and seek possible connections.
Well, the council itself has been the object of malware attacks, hasn't it?
It has. We seem to have been of interest to the Russian and Chinese intelligence services.
Now, the DNC emails really were not classified in any way. All right, they hack in and they get them, but who releases them to the public? It's WikiLeaks, Julian Assange.
Right.
So how does the hacked information get to Julian Assange?
Well, that was part of the reason why people thought this was probably the Russian intelligence services, because originally the person who said they were doing the hacking was calling themselves Guccifer 2.0, which is a reference to another earlier hacker called Guccifer, who hacked into former President Bush's email and Colin Powell's emails and some others. And he created a website that was called DNC Leaks and started pushing the information out there. That person was quickly discredited. He said he was Romanian and he didn't seem to actually speak Romanian. They found some data in the emails that suggested that it was from Russia. How the information now gets from DNC or from John Podesta's emails to WikiLeaks, we don't really know. Some have suggested it's given, it's delivered by hand, so somebody gives a thumb drive to Assange and WikiLeaks. But how that transfer is made, we don't know.
Is it clear there's a connection between Assange and the Russians?
There's no clear evidence of it. I mean, certainly they are interested in the same political outcomes. Assange seems to also have a great deal of animus for Clinton. It is interesting that he's released nothing on the Trump campaign, but we don't have any physical or particularly public evidence right now.
Now, 8 years ago, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, published a list of security threats to the United States, and cyber attacks was at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
Today, it's at the top of the list. What's happened in between?
Well, I think two things. I think one is we've just seen a huge number of attacks, right? So in that 8 years, the U.S. has seen massive espionage campaigns conducted by the Chinese and the Russians. We saw the attack on Sony that seems to come from the North Koreans. We saw attacks on U.S. banks that seems to have come from Iran.
Target stores, who was responsible for that?
The Target was probably criminal, maybe Russian criminal. But so we've seen a massive expansion of just the number of attacks that have happened. And we have increasing vulnerability. We have more and more things that are connected to the internet. And so I think that's why it's moved up dramatically in the threat matrix. And that's why it's at the top now.
Now, the attacks we've seen are would appear to be in the nature of espionage or disruption or just to tease us. But there's been no real devastating attack, an attempt to take down the electric grid or an attempt to completely destroy the banking system. Why haven't we seen anything like that?
Yes, we've only seen one attack that causes physical damage, and that was probably the U.S.-Israel directed attack against the Iranian centrifuges in the nuclear program, which was called Stuxnet or Olympic Games. We have what we think was a Russian attack on Ukrainian power grid in 2015, which took it down for about 6 hours. So other than those two exceptions, you're right. Everything else has been espionage or disruption. I think why we haven't seen it is a combination of deterrence and restraint. There aren't that many countries that could launch a cyber attack that causes physical destruction. Probably a handful: U.S., China, Russia, Israel, Germany, UK. And those countries are not going to launch an attack out of the blue, right? They're not going to destroy physical infrastructure and take out the power grid.
What Panetta called a cyber Pearl Harbor.
Cyber Pearl Harbor, digital Pearl Harbor, cyber 9/11. So there's not going to be an attack out of the blue. They would use those attacks only if their national interests were being severely threatened.
What about ISIS or Al-Qaeda or some terrorist organization?
Yeah, what we've seen is that the terrorist organizations are interested in this, but don't have the capabilities. What the ISIS and Al-Qaeda use the internet and cyberspace for is propaganda, recruitment, and fundraising for finances. But they have shown some interest in cyber attacks, but they don't have the capabilities to launch an attack that causes physical destruction.
Have we considered at all a kind of law of the sea approach where we get together with Russia and China and try to establish some guidelines as to the do's and don'ts of cyberspace?
We have. So the United States has basically argued that the laws of armed conflict apply in cyberspace. So neutrality, proportionality, distinction, all of those things that came out of hundreds of years of physical warfare should apply. China and Russia have argued that no, we need new treaties. Cyberspace is too different to use the old rules. We've had discussions at the UN about what some of the rules of the road should be. So are there some norms? And in 2015, 20 countries agreed to 4 very broad principles about how states should behave in cyberspace.
Now, the United States itself is spending about 4 times as much on cyber offense as cyber defense. I mean, aren't we a major player in cyber war?
We certainly are. I mean, the Chinese and in particular always argue that it was the U.S. that was the first to militarize cyberspace. You know, we set up Cyber Command, which is the Defense Department's unit for cyber defense and offense. We were allegedly behind the attack on the Iranian nuclear program, so we were certainly one of the first to move in this space. I think what those numbers reflect is the problem of defense doesn't seem to be working. Defense clearly isn't working because everyone keeps getting in. And so people think, well, if defense doesn't work, you need more offense.
We've talked about international hacking, but domestic hacking occurs too. And you send me an email from CFR.org and to my Gmail account. And the government isn't supposed to intercept that without a warrant. But somehow or other those communications get hacked. And I think the public generally has grave concerns about privacy. And it's supposed to be a private communication between the two of us, but probably it's accessible to Google, and it may be accessible to Richard Haas at the Council on Foreign Relations, and it may be accessible to others. What should the standards be, balancing security and privacy and freedom of communication?
Yeah, I think you're right. And each of those, right, is a different level of privacy. If I use my work email, then I have no privacy. Basically, the work has the ability to look at any of those. Any domestic communication, as you said, should be private. But if I'm emailing to you when you're abroad, it could get caught up, right? Because we use the same communication techniques as terrorists and spies and others. I don't think we know yet, right? We in a liberal democracy, we are used to having privacy for the individual and transparency for government. But big data, the digital age kind of flips that, and we see a great deal of transparency about individuals because we're leaving so much code and data around. And governments can operate more and more using cyber attacks or special forces or drones away from the public's view. So I think we need to have a debate, and we are having a debate. We saw this come out in the question about the FBI's access to the Apple phone in the terrorism investigation, that we don't know where that balance between security and privacy is.
Well, in San Bernardino, in that situation, the FBI wanted to have access to the data on the phone of a terrorist, and it was password protected. And they said that it would take too much time for them to somehow or other crack into the password. So that presented a dilemma. Eventually, they began discussions, and they actually sued Apple, I guess, and eventually it was settled, and they got access to the data somehow. But does the government have the power to compel Apple to manufacture a backdoor so that law enforcement authorities in the appropriate situation can get access to what's on my iPhone?
Yeah, we don't know yet, right? Because in that case, as you pointed out, the government showed up with the All Writs Act and said, we want you to build this backdoor. Apple made it clear they were going to fight. Both, I think legally, the All Writs Act they had some complaints about, but also the question was, if you build a backdoor into the product, you're going to make everyone unsafe. And that was the positions that we had. The FBI then found a company, basically, that found a vulnerability and sold it to the FBI. We don't know what that vulnerability was. We don't know what the FBI did with it after they had it. So the question was basically kicked down the road. We don't know, can the companies build a product that the government can't get into? They technically, that's where they're working towards. We're not sure as a democracy if that's where we want the companies to be.
Well, you can go back to the late 19th century. In 1890, Brandeis, before he was on the Supreme Court, and his partner Samuel Warren published a very famous article in the Harvard Law Review called The Right of Privacy. And they said that there was a right of privacy, a right to be let alone, which later Brandeis incorporated into various Supreme Court dissents, I think, more than opinions of the court that he wrote. But if in those days, before the digital age, if I wanted privacy, I locked the door and I drew the window shades. Must I practice internet abstinence to have any right of privacy left? Or if I'm on the internet, as anyone can see what's going on?
No, I think we're going to need, quite honestly, we're going to need legislation in the courts to make decisions. I think we saw that in some extent, right, with the question about GPS tracking of criminals, right? So in that case, the police put a GPS tracker without a warrant, I think, on a suspect, and the court ruled that no, that was a violation of privacy, because normally to do that type of supervision or surveillance of a suspect, you would need to have somebody out there 24 hours a day. They'd have to follow them. They'd have to tail them. That puts some burden on the police force. But with GPS tracking, you just put it on the car, and then you can just collect the data for forever, right? It just will last forever. So, as you said, the ease of data collection now is so much more balanced towards the government, or companies for that matter, than it was in Brandeis's time, that we need to have some discussion about how much of that data the government collect and how long they can hold on to it and under what circumstances.
Well, of course, traditionally, the government has created or has sought data, for example, from telephone records, calls back and forth, not the content of the phone call, but the fact that it was made and who were the two people on the call and how long it lasted. Those records are maintained for billing purposes. And I suppose I know when I use the telephone that the phone company is making a record of the fact of that call. But that's already out there. But in the case of the back door with Apple, they want access to things that aren't even out there yet. So isn't this kind of a sea change from what's occurred in the past?
I think it is, and I think also, the phone calls were, as you said, was just the metadata, the time and who you called. But with access to the phone, not only are you getting the phone data, but your location, right? Because the GPS is always pinging it's always pinging cell phones to know where you are. Possibly your health data, right? Because you may be using a fitness app. All your friends, because of all Facebook and everything else. So there does seem to be a qualitative change to the amount of data that we're holding on our phones now than we had before.
There's the issue, I suppose, of internet governance coming out of the Snowden revelations. I mean, from the dawn of the internet, the United States of America, and the United States government has basically been in charge of the internet globally. We're seeing that's beginning to change with the revelation that the U.S. was spying on Dilma Rousseff in Brazil and spying on Angela Merkel in Germany. There's been a a call in certain quarters for kind of a balkanization of the internet. Where do you think that's headed?
Well, I think we are moving towards a fragmentation. I think partly it's driven by the Snowden revelations, right? What the Snowden revelations showed was that the U.S. was certainly taking advantage of the way that data flows, right? Because so much data flows through the U.S. On internet backbones, that the U.S. could easily tap into it. I think the other issue is because so many global platforms, so many global companies are American, that it often involves data of other countries, and they want access to that data, either for economic reasons or generally for law enforcement reasons, right? If a Brazilian commits a crime in Brazil and plans it with his accomplices through Facebook, all of that data is owned by Facebook, which is registered in California. So the Brazilians have to go through a process called the MLAT, the Multilateral Assistance Treaty, to try to get that data. That process can take 10 months. They don't want to have to do that as a sovereign country. So there's lots of increasing incentives for people to store the data locally, and I think we're going to go down that road.
We have a new administration taking office, Obama administration gone. What are the cyber challenges facing the new administration?
Well, I think it's actually fairly remarkable the amount of attention and policy the Obama administration got done. We had some movement in Congress. We had a lot of executive orders, new changes internationally, but I don't think anyone thinks we're safer. So I think the challenges are very much the same, which is that we clearly have no deterrent in cyberspace. Nation states feel like they can attack quickly, and the offense still has the advantage over the defense. It's still very easy to get in.
So could there be a cyber preemptive strike? I mean, we decide that the Chinese are sufficiently mad at us to do something bad, so we jam their electrical grid.
It is possible that either side would use it in a preemptive way. Again, I think that's only likely if there's going to be a military conflict. It's not going to happen just in cyberspace. So I think whoever takes office is going to have many of the same challenges the Obama administration did, but an even greater sense of vulnerability. I think everyone is now more aware of it than they were 8 years ago. I think the vulnerability is going to go up because of what's called the Internet of Things, right? So we saw that DVRs and cameras and other devices that are connected to the internet were hijacked and used to knock off a company that was supporting Twitter and Facebook and Netflix and other things. So the Internet of Things is increasing our vulnerability, and so there's going to be a lot more pressure on the next administration to move quickly.
What would you like to see happen? Suppose the new Cyber Czar is Adam Siegel.
Two things most important is, one is what's starting to happen, but will have to happen in the next administration, is that the government is still using so much legacy information technology that we have to modernize that. So much of it was decentralized, was disjointed, and so we could have massive breaches like we had in the Office of Personnel Management, because that agency, there's no way that they could defend themselves. They didn't have the technology and they didn't have the personnel. So we need to make sure that the government is buying the right technology and that we have a more centralized vision, which is like a chief information technology security officer.
Will we need to enlist the private sector?
Private sector is already heavily involved. So one of the issues is how to get the right people into those jobs, because if you have cybersecurity expertise, you can make a lot more in the private sector. And federal bureaucracy is going to be fairly frustrating. So can we think of ways how to get people in short-term and voluntary? And there are now programs that should be expanded. The United States Digital Service, for one, that allows people to come in and address a problem. I think on the domestic side, we are probably moving towards a world of software liability, which is we didn't have before, which is the writers of software didn't have any liability for getting hacked or security flaws. But with the Internet of Things, that's not going to be sustainable, right? People, if it causes destruction or death, then people are going to get sued. I think once we have those incentives in place, then the companies themselves are going to do a much better job at providing a safe product.
Maybe you can just tell us a little more about Internet of Things. This is a new concept.
This is a new concept. So the Internet of Things is basically any device that's connected to the internet that is communicating over the internet, collecting data. In your house, Right now, you could probably have 15 or 20 devices that are connected to the internet. Your oven, your garage opener, your thermostat, perhaps some of your kids' toys, all communicating to the internet. So all of these devices, most of them have very little security built into them. Or they often will have a password that's been set by the factory and the buyer doesn't know about it and that never changes it. So they're easily taken over. And we've seen many, many hacks of them, both for data purposes and to create other outcomes.
All right, so I have a question for you. Adam Siegel, since we've come to the end of this fascinating interview, has hacking become the game changer in the digital age?
I think there's two views of cyber, the revolutionary view and the evolutionary view. I'm more of an evolutionary guy. I think what we've seen so far is that cyber has actually been adopted by the nations and used in the great game and in geopolitics. It's one more tool, and we see that the great powers have been very good at using it. It's going to shape our lives in those ways. It's not going to overturn everything.
Adam Siegel, an evolutionary guy, thank you so much for coming by. And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations in the digital age. All the best and take care. I'm Jim Zirin.